Hello and welcome to Salem Voices. I'm Lucy Rose, your host, and I am delighted to introduce you today to our special guest from the Salem College class of 2005, Dr. Rhonda Gillespie Green. Rhonda's joined us today from London as she prepares to move to Spain. What a life. Welcome, Rhonda. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Lucy. It's really great to be here.
Oh, you're so, thank you is all I got to say, especially for your making time for us on your incredibly busy schedule. But I have to say, speaking of moving, complicated logistics having to do with moving leads us directly to me to sharing your journey, which is about as complicated as anything I've ever seen, because you're one of the most accomplished people I have ever met. I know,
Thank
frankly,
you.
it could take 2 hours for you to share, maybe longer, what your journey has been like since you left us as a senior at Salem. But in 5 minutes or less, this is your test for the morning, okay? In 5 minutes or less, what have you done from the time you were a senior to the time you are today?
Sure. So I'll try to be somewhat fast here. So from the time that I left Salem as a senior, and I guess in some true Salem traditions, I got married. I became a teacher. I lived in South Korea. I lived in Equatorial Guinea. I lived in Germany. I returned to the United States, and then I came and moved to London. Along the way, I earned two master's degrees, my PhD. I became a mother in 2018 and picked up, a few awards along the way as well, including a
Did
U.S.
you ever?
Fulbright and a 10 Outstanding Young Americans Award, which, for those who don't know, has been won by people like Al Gore and Richard Nixon and Elvis Presley. So it was a pretty prestigious achievement. I've appeared on the BBC twice, appeared in The Guardian twice, and just really become an expert in my field. So it's been extremely busy, as you note, Lucy, but a great journey nonetheless.
Wow, what a journey. And you did that in 1 minute or less without breaking out into an Elvis song, which is pretty amazing. I think I'm in the presence of royalty today for sure. And I hope everybody watching is laughing along with us in celebration, frankly, of everything you have accomplished in what I'm going to look at you and say a very short time. I mean, 2005 till today, I can't imagine anyone having done more in life and lived in more places. We're going to come back to that in a minute, because really to be able to travel like that and find a home and create a home and all those different places says a lot about you as a person. And
And I actually think I left one out, Madagascar. I didn't include that I lived
okay,
in
for
one year,
anybody
but
listening, Madagascar is one of the coolest places in the world. Ron is going to tell us what special is in Madagascar that is in nowhere else in the world. There's an animal that lives there.
oh goodness, there's several, but one of the most famous is the lemur.
Isn't it fantastic? I love the
Yes,
lemur. And if by
yes.
chance you're watching and you live in North Carolina, you do not have to travel all the way to Madagascar to see one, though I suggest you do. Duke has an amazing collection of lemurs as well, so you can see them right there. But wow, how cool. Not many people have been to Madagascar. They may only know it from their Monopoly board. You know,
Or from the movie, the cartoon movie as well.
or for the cartoon. I love that. I love that. All right, so you've been everywhere, done lots of things. There's no question about it. But
Yes.
what are you doing right now? You are impacting our world in so many ways. This is a big topic. But can you kind of bring us up to date? Where's all that stuff led you? What are you doing?
Sure. So this year I actually began a new job. So I'm currently the global head of training and e-learning at the Internet Society, which is a global nonprofit working to make sure that the Internet of Opportunity benefits all. As a global head of training and e-learning, I'm responsible for rebuilding and redeploying our suite of courses to over 70,000 members and a wider network of supporters. And so being here, being in this role for me is not the pinnacle, but certainly getting me to where I want to be. After Salem, as I mentioned earlier, I began work as a teacher. And so in 2010, I actually connected with a course in my first master's degree called Technology and Education. And that kind of initiated my transition into a tech sector career. So actually just 10 years ago, last month is when I started working in tech. And so now at one of the three organizations that plays a strong role in running and operating the internet that we all enjoy and all need today, given that we're in a pandemic. Separate from the Internet Society, I also co-founded and helped run my own business. It's a digital consultancy. It's a women-owned digital consultancy focusing on providing sustainable solutions to development challenges with a focus on gender, education, and technology. Panoply Digital, that socially conscious organization is something near and dear to my heart because working in international development, working in tech, and working in education, I just saw that there was a huge gap in terms of people and organizations working to make things sustainable. There's a running joke in international development that you should be trying to work yourself out of the job. And unfortunately, I did not see that to be the case myself because
right.
yeah, lots of projects and whatnot would be approved that just weren't well thought out in their design. And often they were developed from a technologist perspective and did not have the touch of an educator. So Panoply Digital was created to kind of bridge those two worlds. And so we've worked on exciting projects with USAID, which is the United States government's international development agency, the Department for International Development in the UK, the German Development Agency, also known as GIZ, and a lot of UN agencies as well. So that I'm very proud of starting that business, and it's successful, still going today. And then also recently this year, I was appointed as a non-executive director for Noise Solution, which is one of the UK's top 100 social enterprises that does incredible work digitally with youth and music production, trying to improve their well-being. So there are many hats that I hold right now, and I think perhaps the most important job of them all is being mom in chief to my little girl, Ava.
Chief Mom Officer. We like that.
Yes, the CMO.
Hey, Ms. Rhonda, I just got Dr. Rhonda. I'm sorry. There's no Ms. Rhonda. We're going to go Dr. Rhonda. Okay, I thought I was awake, not 24/7, but 27 or something. Do you sleep at all? And then we're going to get back to that.
This is a very famous and often asked question to me. I do sleep, but I would say that when compared to the average person, I make much more use of those interstitial moments that you might do nothing in. I'm always kind of finding something to do, which is good and bad. When I am finding those things to do, they're usually trying to make a difference in the world, but working more and more on also resting and enjoying time for myself.
Okay, I just have to put that plug in for sleep.
Sure.
I
Yes.
used to not
Sleep,
sleep at all. Now I really try
Netflix,
to do
still,
better.
all of it.
And it does help make those interstitial moments richer somehow or another. At least
Yes.
maybe you remember them better. But wow, what an incredible difference you make in the world. Really and truly, it's remarkable. And I want to play on one thing here because you're making a giant difference in all three of the things you mentioned just now, obviously. But one of those you started yourself, Panoply, it sounds like.
That's correct.
To be an entrepreneur takes an amazing amount of courage and resilience as you start and stop and are successful here and have to tweak here and fine tune here. If there's somebody out there who might want to be an entrepreneur, what have you kind of learned from that experience that you might share with them? They might want to start a nonprofit, and try to find, like you, and find or a socially conscious one and find a solution to the world. Or maybe it is a for-profit, who knows? But what
Sure.
kind of words of wisdom might you have for them as they kind of begin that journey?
Oh goodness. Well, I would say two things: to choose quality over quantity, and that slow and steady wins the race. So, with regards to choosing quality over quantity, I remember in 2015 when we first launched our operations. We were really struggling to drum up our initial business, our first customers, and I would say that, having the patience to wait for opportunities that were a right fit for us. So there were several opportunities that we could have applied to, and we chose not to because we all made a commitment that, if there was no possibility of work that we took on being sustainable, if we couldn't leave the world in a better place after our involvement, that, it was not going to be a good fit for us. And so we had the great fortune to acquire a client in 2015 that we've now had from the beginning. And that was a high quality client in that what we did with them is sustainable. It's having an impact in several countries outside of the United States where this organization is headquartered. And we're helping people start or run their own businesses, maintain their own businesses
Ah,
once they have them. And so for me, once we did that particular client engagement that year, we acquired another one that saw me go to the Philippines to work on behalf of the US government to do an evaluation of a higher education partnership. And so we had just those two clients in that first year, but they were very high quality. And so when I say high quality, I mean in the sense of, they were sustainable, as I said. The clients themselves were really committed to implementing the changes or the recommendations that we made. And so afterwards you can still point to our work and its impact. So then the next year we got more clients and more clients and more clients. And so every year has been a steady build. And as you might imagine, with a focus on digital learning, we actually have had, quite an influx of opportunities since the pandemic began, simply because we are working to make sure that, people can stay online and people can still learn during this very difficult time in the world. So please choose quality over quantity, because I think your reputation goes a longer way than most people think. And then in terms of slow and steady wins the race, similarly, as I said, it was a slow burn with starting to acquire clients, but once that began, we have more clients now than we know what to do with. And so I think
blessing
for
and curse
me,
simultaneously, right?
yes, and I
Yeah.
think in, the Silicon Valley ethos, it's a real, like, work fast, break things or whatever, and work in ways that may not necessarily be sustainable, or that do not enable you to be ethical in how you work, or to care about people or the environment. And I think that when you're racing to try to build a business, or maybe even get acquired,
Yeah.
some things do tend to get lost along the way, as we've seen with a lot of the startups that run the U.S. economy. So, well, not just the US economy, but the global economy. So I would definitely say, go slow, take your time to really perfect your offering or your product. And I think that in the long run, you'll be more satisfied with the outcomes.
Wow. Thank you. I got to say, too, I think, to do what you have done in so many ways, everything from living overseas to applying for a Fulbright scholarship, for heaven's sakes, to speaking to someone like The Guardian and being on BBC and starting businesses, all of these things that you've done. I just have to say, for me as an outsider looking in and having started my own business as well through the years, takes so much courage, a lot of courage, because when you start that, it may work, it may not. You clearly believe in
Right.
yourself, or you would have never done that. But were you just born with that kind of courage, or did you develop it along the way? Did you say, I don't really care what anybody says or thinks, or, where do you find that courage? And then how important to you also is resilience, being able to bounce back? Because I think they're kind of back to back things.
Sure. Well, with courage, I definitely do not think I was born with it, though I think if you are a Black person in America every day, you have to exhibit courage to deal with what we deal with as Black people globally, but particularly in the United States. So there's an element there of coming from a poor and working class background, and not having my future set out for me in the sense that nothing was given to me. Everything was very, very well earned, and I had to work hard to do that. And I still recall my mom telling me in high school that I was going to go to college and I was going to get a scholarship to pay for it. And so having
It's not a choice, it
her
sounds like, in
belief.
your family. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sorry.
It was not a choice in your family, clearly.
No, it was not a choice.
Yeah.
And so having that mandate, if you will, to do that responsibility, took courage for me to develop along the way. Like, okay, this is what I know I have to do. And contrary to popular belief, or maybe myth or urban legend, in high school I was actually quite shy. Even though I think I maintained my sense of humor, I was not as outgoing. I was bullied quite a bit, for being overweight. At that time, my teeth were not, straightened. So, I got a lot of derision and just nasty comments and remarks. So that kind of made me try to hide away.
Of course.
And I would say that well, not ironically, because I think as Salem sister, as well as I do, the transformative experiences that you can have attending a women's college. And for me, the courage that I developed, initially from being Black, initially from knowing that, I had this task ahead of me, was then really solidified at Salem, where, I was enabled to come into my own, to be myself, to become involved, to become a leader, and given many opportunities to take a lead and to shine. And so for me, that courage, a lot of it came from my Salem experience and attending a women's college, at a time where I was like, I did not see the value. I was like, how will I date? All these silly
And there are
things
no
that you
football
see.
games.
Yes, no football games, none of these
Yeah,
things. But,
yeah,
I was really seen at Salem. And when I compared that experience to that of my friends who went to local universities that were very large, people were shocked that, Dr. Julianne Still Thrift knew my name, knew me by name. All of the experiences that I had at Salem, gave me lots of courage. So I would say, that was there. I took my first trips abroad with Salem. So
yeah.
much, came from that. And so, going to your question on resilience, I think this is something I'm still building. I think resilience is like a gob of bubble gum, maybe, that hardens over time. And I think I'm still congealing, for a very
I
kind of
love that
creepy,
visual.
gross
I laugh about that
metaphor.
all day. A drop of bubble gum. I love it. Yeah,
Yes, but it's, sometimes I get holes poked in it. I mean,
yeah.
in the past decade, I literally lost half of my family. And one of my best friends from Salem, Antoinette Irving, who was also the class of 2005. So the past 10 years really tested me, because as you hear, I did all of those things, or many of those things, in the past decade. Yet through that all, I was dealing with, unimaginable losses. And so, I think my bubble gum is starting to harden again. And so I think it's something that, fluctuates in time, one's resilience. And you will have things that really try your patience, and your willingness to keep going. And I think that's then when you tap into courage to not give up.
Wow. Thank you. And I'm sure, I hope everybody listening has the same feeling I do. I really love the way you said all of that. And I was kidding about the bubble gum. It is a wonderful visual, but the whole concept of not giving up. And I just want to pause and say how sorry I am about all your losses over the last several years. It has to
Thank
have been
you.
very difficult to deal with. And thank you for sharing that with all of us, and all love right back at you.
Sure.
Um,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Let's explore that Fulbright just a little bit. We'll change the subject here. I can't imagine. Let me just say, this club, for anybody who doesn't know, the Fulbright Association is one of the most incredible organizations to be able to be a part of in this country, and because of their impact truly in this world. It is an honor beyond belief to be accepted as a Fulbright scholar and to have the opportunity to work under that banner. And Rhonda is one of the very few people that you may ever meet in life that actually is, I think, kind of is forever, but was for that moment in time an actual working Fulbright scholar. Can tell us about that, Rhonda. When did you win it? Where did you study and what did you study?
Sure. So my Fulbright journey is, again, like many good things in my life, started at Salem. So Dr. Yohe, who was beloved not just by me, but by so many women and colleagues in the Salem community. He first told me about Fulbright because he himself served as a Fulbright scholar, I believe it was, or Fulbright academic, I believe, to Latvia. And so he told me about it. I read more about it. And at the time, I just thought, oh gosh, it would never be for me. And one of the things he constantly said, and it was, in so much sincerity, he was like, you should definitely apply. And if you don't get it, you'll get it on the second time. I applied and I did not get it the first time either, and it's not uncommon. And I think you really have the talent to qualify for this award. And so at the time I applied to do a study abroad at a law school in Colombia, and I was rejected, and I was like sad, but not as sad as I could have been, because I recall what Dr. Yohe said to me. So after that, when I was in London in 2012, 2013, I was preparing to plan out my PhD field work, which of course, PhD field work, you sometimes live a year or more abroad. And in my case, I was going to be living in Kenya. And so I was like, "Ooh, how will I fund this?" Yes, I was working full time, but that was taking care of my existing responsibilities. So this was something in addition. So I said, "All right, let me try to give it a whirl with the Fulbright." And so with that, I went to an event where there were Kenyan government officials that work in education attending this event, and just kind of introduced myself, networked, and made the contacts that eventually ended up in securing government support, like from the Kenyan government, for my Fulbright, and then also the support of one of the top schools in the country in Kenya. And so having that, and then also getting letters from my professors in my first master's and my second master's programs, and I put together that application and I felt good about it, but had no idea whether or not I would be successful. And so I still remember the day that I was notified about the Fulbright, because it's a day that I think for many Americans will live in infamy. It was the day that the Boston Marathon bombing occurred, and
Oh, yeah.
literally, I want to say 5 seconds after I got that email, I was sharing it on Facebook, and then there was no real response. And then I realized why, because of the Boston Marathon bombing. And so that happened. And for me, it was like, of course, I was so joyous to receive this honor. But then also just so sad for obviously the terrorism that had taken place in the United States and in Boston, where I actually, I studied. I did my first master's there. I connected with, one of our Salem alums there as well, Sally Craig Uber.
Oh,
And
I love
so,
Sally Craig. For
yes,
anybody
she's
listening,
amazing.
she was recently a chair of our board of trustees.
Oh,
Sally.
yes, she was. She
So yeah,
was. And
lovely
so,
people.
having lived
Yeah.
there, having made friends there, the pursuit afterwards, I was so worried about my friends in Boston. So that was a really crazy thing. But my father was one of the first people that I told about that. And, he died the next month. So for me, that was, it was a very tough time as well, to know that I had won this award, and that he was the first person I called and told about it, and then to lose him so soon after that. And so for me, the Fulbright, everything I did was in his honor, and it was incredible because my Fulbright award was the first award made for an education technology project in the history of Fulbright. So for me, I felt that that was a huge endorsement of the work, the academic work that I was doing. And so, despite the loss of my father, it was definitely, in his memory, then undertaking the field work and kind of, making that the outcome of that kind of be in his honor.
Wow. I think you've created more firsts than pretty much anybody I know. I heard you loud and clear about that. I know your father could not be more proud of you with doing that,
I
and
hope.
you honor him every day with your life, clearly, and how you do that. And then lastly, I think what you just described about the Fulbright is exactly what it sounds like. One of the things you learned at Salem, we're just talking about courage and resilience.
Yeah.
I'm going to add one more thing to that: strategy, strategic thinking, because you knew how to go about getting that darn second time. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
You brought your whole community together and said, I want a Fulbright and I need your help, in essence, to just distill that, and went
Right.
out and found the folks to help you get it. But you had the courage to try and the resilience to try again. You didn't get so discouraged by not getting it the first time that you
That's
applied a
right.
second time, and that time you nailed it. And it reminds me when I hear you talk about Dr. Yost, I I think what a mentor he must have been to you, to set it up front. Don't be nervous if you don't get it the first time. Try again. The value of mentors and folks share their expertise and wisdom with you is overwhelming. Do you have mentors in your life? And I'm just guessing you are a mentor to others as well, based on everything else
um,
you said. What's the place of importance of mentors in your life?
well, honestly, I think, I didn't really understand what a mentor or a sponsor was until I made my transition into the tech sector. So I do have, two mentors and sponsors. I call them sponsors because they do both. And their names are Dr. Nancy Hafkin and Miss Sonia George. And so both of these women in my life made a huge difference. When I was first getting into technology and education, through my research, I happened upon Dr. Hafkin, and saw that people said she was one of the nicest people that they ever met. And so I took a risk, and I reached out to her and did not expect a response. And 4 hours later, I got one. And so living in Boston, she took me in, and she's like, well, if you're really interested in getting into tech, one of my friends, Sonia George, is looking for an intern. And so Sonia was leading an area of a company called Pyramid Research, which was a telecommunications research firm. And so she led up their policy practice. And You know, I had no experience in tech, and she saw my CV. She read a sample of my work, and she basically said, okay, I see that you can write, but let's see if you can write about tech. And within, you know, a year, I produced and wrote a report that became the top selling report for the company. And that was so much due to the things that I learned from Nancy and from Sonia. And so that report, you know, I've had my work at Pyramid Research picked up by Nokia, Alcatel Lucent, the World Bank, you know, very, very big name organizations. And my position with working with Sonia set the stage for the next job that I then got into tech, which was even a bigger step up in terms of the profile of the organization. So throughout my career in tech, they have always been there for advice, recommendations. Nancy, on more than one occasion, ceded her place to me at United Nations meetings, enabling me to speak, for me to raise my profile. Sonia has constantly been a connector. And in fact, you know, I mentioned at the start that I work for the Internet Society. And Sonia was the person that told me, hey, you should check out to see if they have any availability. And lo and behold, they did. They have the role that I now have. So for me, it, you know, they made a transformative difference in my life as a Black woman in tech, a sector where we are very severely underrepresented. And these two white women went beyond performative allyship of, you know, posting Black squares and saying Black Lives Matters,
Yeah.
to put their time and their money where their mouths are, and to really mentor and sponsor me in ways that have enabled me to do the same for others.
I would love to have a full hour just to talk about that. You opened a big door right there, Rhonda. I would love to be able to walk right through that with you. Um, well, unfortunately, we don't have another hour that we can talk about that, but thank you for sharing that story. And it does matter how
I
we help
love
one
talking about
another.
them. They're
Yes,
amazing.
ma'am. How we help one another, how we pull one another up, how we walk the talk, not just talk the talk, matters every day, doesn't it? And
For sure.
we get to do that for others every day if we want to. And to have those
That's for
women
sure.
do that for you is wonderful and something all of us should be doing for others every day, I think. So well
I
done.
would
My
agree.
guess is you're doing the same for others every day of your life as well. But it's just your way.
I am.
Yeah.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
helping people, and you know, as you already know, I'm super busy from what I said, but for me, I make the time for people not only because of what was done for me, but because I believe that, you know, there are so many people who are so phenomenal out there, and if I can play a small role in helping them to excel, to attain their goals or their dreams, then I'm very happy to do that, because I think, you know, too often, you know, people, especially nowadays with the climate in the United States, people are not, you know, remembering why we live. I think we live to help each other. I think we live to make the world a better place. And you know, tearing down other people, or being jealous, or being worried that they're going to exceed you, are things that keep mentors and sponsors from actually doing the right thing. And I've been so proud of my own abilities in this space, which might sound narcissistic, but you know, I'm really proud because I'm proud of what the people that I've mentored and sponsored have gone on to do, to go from administrator, coordinator level roles to become country directors or senior directors within their organizations, making huge impact, you know, earning well, being respected as an expert in their fields. And for me, you know, at one stage, one of my mentees was even earning more than me, which most people would be furious at. Well, I was furious at it, but it was because of gender and race-based pay discrimination. But I was so delighted because I'm like, if you are working with me and you don't one day exceed me, then I'm not doing my job right. I should never mentor or sponsor to where you get to my level if I'm not encouraging you to go further than your wildest dreams and your highest expectations, and I'm not doing my job well. And so for me it's very personal, and I love it just because of how much having that same level of support and dedication meant to me and to my career and to my family and to everything.
You can actually, you're one of the few people I've ever spoken with. You can actually feel your passion. Palpable. So I know who I'm going to ask to be my next mentor in life, and that will be Dr. Rhonda. How
Thank
fortunate
you.
people are to have you mentor them. And just what
I'm fortunate
Rhonda
they let
said,
me join them on their journey.
I
It goes
just,
both ways.
it's remarkable for you to be a guide for some of these people and to have that attitude. Your own self-confidence shows, because I think so often one reason we're not able to give of ourselves that way is because we don't have our own self-confidence built
That's right.
strongly enough. And clearly you do. You're not threatened by that. You are joyful because of their
Yes.
success. So
Yes,
I'm going to
definitely.
turn us to Salem, speaking of joy, because that makes me smile too as I think about Salem. And I want to turn us before we go for us to really think about that. All right, so let's do just a quick little rapid fire, one word answers, just to kind of get us in the Salem mood for everybody listening from Salem. All right, so as you think back, one word, what was your favorite course?
So it's not one word, and that's because the course wasn't one word, but it
Okay,
was
you're on then. That's okay.
Dr. Gary Youngquist. It was a course that looked at Pedro Almodovar's films and analyzed them. And Pedro Almodovar is a very famous Spanish film director. And going into that world with Dr. Youngquist was something so spectacular, so fabulous, and just full of surprises. And that was my standout favorite
That
course.
was cool. And you majored in Spanish. You double majored, but I think one of them was in
That's
Spanish,
right.
right? So
That's correct.
yeah, so clearly that made, I don't know if that made an impact, which came first, the chicken or the egg, but certainly that enabled you to appreciate that as fully as you did. I'm quite sure as
Oh,
well.
for sure.
All right, dear. What was your favorite tradition?
My favorite tradition was having the little sisters and having a big sister. For me, I, of course, have my own big sister in real life, but that tradition for me was just really special. I love the idea, and I think it went even further than the idea of having a sisterhood with Salem College more broadly.
You know what? I'm going to ask one more thing. Then I want to come back to that piece because that's a really cool tradition we should just ask a little bit more about and probe. But lastly, did you have a secret place to study? If somebody wanted to find you, Rhonda, and you needed to escape, where did you go to study?
I think if my Salem sisters that that I'm closest to saw this, they would say, "Study? That girl never studied,"
I,
and that would be not 100% true. But when I did study, it was most often either in my room or in the library on the third floor.
okay, so there wasn't like a sneaky place you went off to in a quiet room in the FAC or something like that. You did it in
No,
your own room. If you
no.
did,
I
that's
was far too lazy to go to the FAC on a regular for that. So
I see, I got you. All right, so let's play with those sisters just a second because you brought
sure,
it up and you said they would call you out on the whole concept of studying. Now, hopefully they're going to watch this, so they may have something to say when they contact you afterwards. But do
sure.
you still keep in touch with some of your Salem sisters, and how important is that to you?
I do. We have our own, name that we refer to each other as. And I would say that remaining in touch with this core group of women has been a masterclass in pace settings. All of us with terminal degrees in our respective fields, all of us women of color, all of us having, quite incredible experiences professionally and personally since departing Salem. But even beyond that core group of women, there are others that I keep in touch with. And as a matter of fact, I just recently this week connected with one, Srijana, who was in the class of 2006, so the year after us, who found me on LinkedIn and connected, and we caught up about our lives. So that Salem connection, even if they're not in your nearest and dearest, I feel that it is a strong connection, especially when you've overlapped during your time there.
Yeah, that's really cool. All right. I love to ask people this, and you can define it however you want to, but
Sure.
what to you is kind of the Salem secret sauce? I mean, what about your experiences at Salem causes you to look back with the love that clearly lights up your face when you think about it and says, this is a really special place? Can you put a finger on that?
Sure. I think for me, what was special about Salem was its location and then the size. I remember when I came up for scholarship weekend, I had not looked at any of the materials beforehand because I was like, for sure, I'm not going there, but free trip to North Carolina, why not?
Why not? Yeah.
And so when we turned onto the campus, like my jaw dropped and I was like, oh my God, what is
This is
this?
a college?
Yes, it was a
Yeah.
college, and then seeing the people in the historical wear curating, this living museum, that for me was a huge surprise, but something that I came to love because it was one of the most beautiful places to that time that I had ever seen in my life, and it still is one of the most beautiful campuses I think in the world. And so that was a part of the secret because you fall in love with the place, so you fall in love with Salem too. I think another part of the secret sauce is the size. So, whereas colleges and universities are working to get more and more people in, and Salem is as well, by the size of its footprint, its physical footprint, at some stage you can't really go beyond, a certain number. And I felt that, that limitation in several ways made Salem more intimate. Like you really got to know people, even though I may not have been close with everyone in my class. You knew something about
Yeah.
pretty much everyone in your class and who you graduated with. And so for me, that level of knowledge and connection was certainly not present for my friends who went to Florida State University and the University of South Florida. And so people marvel that I've stayed in touch, with people from Salem, but that would not have been possible if the size was, crazy big, numbering in the thousands, and in some cases the hundreds of thousands now, right? So I think those two things were key. And then if I could add just one more ingredient, I would also say that you had this ethos around the importance of women's education that, I think is so undervalued. I think that, women being able to learn in safe spaces, especially now that I'm in a male dominated sector, I feel that I would not have been as strong. I would not have as much courage. I would not be as resilient as I am now to deal with a male dominated environment if I had not been given space to find my voice, to shake off the feeling of being shy, to grow into someone who was told that I could make a difference. And I think that for Salem, is a thing that keeps women enrolling. It keeps alums giving. It's so important to so many of us for different reasons, but those three for me.
Wow. Thank you. Um, those are really fine sauces, that's for sure. And something that Salem still maintains, of course, today in those same ways, which is lovely,
Yeah.
and vital to all the women that we are educating for the future. Which brings me to those women that are there now or have just recently graduated. If you were to think back on your life and you were to write that letter we hear about to your 20-year-old self, to those that are at Salem today or maybe who've just graduated, what would you tell your 20-year-old self? Just very briefly.
I would say go to class.
Go to class and study, of course.
make, make sure you go to class.
Okay,
I
good,
think
good
for
point,
me,
Rhonda.
I think I relied too much on my natural intelligence. Like I was a gifted child, so I always had, skills. Like I have a pretty like photographic
Yeah.
memory. So I would not apply myself as much as I could and not go
Mhm.
consistently. And that is something I would tell my 20-year-old self to do it, to go.
Okay.
And I think another thing that I didn't do that um I would tell my 20-year-old self is to live in the moment and enjoy it. And every moment that we live through is history. And I think, those times there for me, so many sweet times, so many fun times, and savor them, really, really enjoy them for all they're worth, because there is nowhere else like Salem. And when I reunite with my closest girlfriends, that's when I feel like that magic rekindles. But it's such a special place, so enjoy it while you're there is what I would tell my young 20-year-old self.
Wow. Again, words of wisdom and thank you. And I wish we had, again, so much more time because I'd love to pick your brain about what you think about the current environment, about access to high-speed internet and how that's creating issues right now with so many of our students not being able to access it in a time where they're having to try to study and learn via internet. The challenges are involved there and all the many things that are happening today, because clearly you're one of the world's experts on all of that. And that's what you
Yes.
do. But I
Yes.
promise folks that we limit this to around 45 minutes. So maybe we'll just come back and talk about that again or
Sure, a part
panel
two of
together,
some
do
sort.
something part two that's really about truly just what you do and you're thinking around that. But until then, it's time to bring this home. And I hate to say that, but I would really love just for you to have clearly the last word, just to look right into the camera and tell anybody what you think your most important takeaway that you'd love to leave them with would be on this day?
Sure. I think that as we see higher education experiencing, great strains in terms of resources, and we know that Salem has gotten through a very difficult time, I would encourage people, as my one of my close friends, Lonnie San Antonio, Dr. Lonnie San Antonio, has always told me from the beginning, just give, even if it's $1. That participation shows up as something significant in terms of our institutional health. And I think that, with finances being squeezed, the pandemic, the job losses, everything, one of the best things you can do is support Salem, of course, after you've supported yourself and your loved ones, because I think it pays dividends. This network that we are a part of, I would say, is even better than the Harvards and the Yales of the world, because
Right.
you can have that network, but people may never respond to you when you need help. But I have never encountered that in my life. And in fact, when I was on my nearly year-long maternity leave last year, a Salem sister, Anna Claire Krogan, who graduated after me, was kind enough to help me with housing while I was waiting to move into my new apartment. So she housed me and my baby girl, and that's that Salem connection that you won't get anywhere else. And so it's important that Salem exists for another 250 years. And so I would just encourage my sisters, even if it's 50 cents, anything you can do,
You're right.
participate, to give. Everything counts, everything adds up. And also congratulations for the way that we rallied to help Salem steer the corner from a very dark time in our history. So that is the final word I'll end with.
I just can't thank you enough. And you're so right. I promised it would be the final word, and it is. I just want to echo it. How does that sound?
Good,
Okay.
good, good. We
Okay,
need
because
that.
it really does matter. You're so right. And even 50 cents is helpful.
Mm,
But right now is the time, with the COVID impact and all the things that are going on now more than ever to educate really, really incredibly successful people like you and all the rest of everyone who's ever come through those hallowed halls and walls on those bricks. Every dollar helps. Can't thank you
yes.
enough. Look, I just got to say again, on behalf of all of us, the whole Salem community, I just can't thank you enough for sharing your story on Salem Voices this
Good. Thank
day.
you so
It's
much for having
unbelievable.
me here.
You make us so, so proud, all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
And good
Thank
luck with
you,
your move
Lucy.
to Spain, which we also didn't get to
Thank
explore. And I can't
you.
thank you enough for that. And to
That'll
all of
be
our,
part two, Lucy.
yeah, okay, part two, you're on. We got a lot already for part two, Miss Dr. Rhonda. I
Yes.
love that. Thank you. We'll bring you back. And to all
Sure.
of our viewers, to those who've had the pleasure of watching Rhonda today, I really look forward to seeing you again in 2 weeks for the next episode of Salem Voices. And until then, Rhonda and I say, Salem Strong.
Salem strong.
Salem Strong. Thank you, Rhonda.
Thank you.